one of the researchers at the Research Council immediately suspected a defeat device, which is this software designed to cheat emissions tests. Someone had to write code, validate the code, and test it. And the significance of that is it's not a mistake. It's a corporate conspiracy.
Can I just note how hilarious it is that there's a word for this? There's a phrase, defeat device. Does not give me a lot of hope.
Well, I mean, part of the industry standards are having defeat devices.
Of course. We all know about the defeat devices.
Ever wonder what really happens when your rights are violated and what you can do about it? Ever wonder what the law looks like outside of TV dramas and headlines? Meet Quinn Mayberry, a Harvard-trained trial lawyer who has helped individuals recover millions of dollars, and Alex Lobert, Quinn's lifelong friend and your law translator-in-chief, here to make the law make sense. On this show, they cover headline-making legal battles and overlook cases to show you how to fight back and win. This is Legally Curious.
Good morning.
Oh, let's do this.
Looking good, Alex. All right, let's dive into this story. We're talking about Dieselgate today.
I have never thought so much about emissions testing and German vehicles. Yeah, if any of our offline conversations are an allusion to how this conversation go, it will be spicy and hopefully very entertaining.
Yep. All right, so it's January 7th, 2017, Miami International Airport. Oliver Schmidt is trying to return to Germany after vacation with his wife. He's a mid-level Volkswagen manager, and his lawyers warned him not to come back to the U.S. 8 FBI agents are waiting. They arrest him in the airport bathroom. 8 agents surround him while he's on the toilet, and his mugshot becomes the face of Dieselgate worldwide. He'll ultimately get 7 years in federal prison. But the CEO who approved the continuing fraud while looking at a PowerPoint slide titled indictment, never spent a day in jail, still free today. And here's the kicker. Americans who bought the cars that are the subject of today's episode got $29,000 each, roughly, while Europeans with identical cars, identical problems, got something like $600 in compensation. This is the story about how a $70,000 research grant exposed a $34 billion fraud that arguably killed hundreds of thousands of people.
Woof on...
Whoop is right, Alex.
Okay, the killing people really was a buzzkill at the end there.
To be fair, that is based on some studies where they're making some projections, and we're not talking about people, being murdered in the streets here, but it's not pretty stuff.
Yeah, thank goodness. That was like this. I mean, it was already a big story. That would have been like, total international scandal. But I will say, very good ROI on a $70,000 research grant uncovering this kind of scandal.
Dude, absolutely. Okay, so to the research grant, it's 2012, West Virginia University. They win a modest grant to test clean diesel cars on actual roads. And it's one of the first times anybody's doing this. If, like me, you had questions about that, people do these tests, but they're not on like highway roads or on like actual driving conditions. They're on test tracks or in labs. The scientist leading the team says they hope 3 people will read our paper. So they're driving this VW Jetta, a VW Passat, and a BMW used as a control, 6,000 kilometers along the West Coast. And they have portable emissions equipment in the trunk. BMW passes fine. The 2 VWs, any guesses?
Didn't do so hot.
Yeah, like the Jetta 15 to 35 times the legal limit. the Passat 5 to 20 times the legal limit. So the lab director has this quote. He says, "As a scientist, you start doubting your results." They kept rechecking. I mean, this is just like so different than the emissions testing in the labs and the emission test reports that they'd reported to regulators, that as a scientist, you have to wonder if, is this me? Am I the one messing this up?
I mean, I think we've all had that moment where you're like looking at something and you're like, no, this can't be right.
Exactly.
What am I looking at?
This up, and I guess it was probably me.
Yeah, right. Like, they can't be this bad. Right?
Yeah, totally. But they were. One of the researchers at the Research Council immediately suspected a defeat device, which is this software designed to cheat emissions test. So he knew what that was and he knew the scope of it. Someone had to write code, validate the code, and test it. And the significance of that is it's not a mistake. It's a corporate conspiracy.
Can I just note how hilarious it is that there's a word for this? There's a phrase, defeat device. Does not give me a lot of hope.
Well, I mean, part of the industry standards are having defeat devices.
Of course. We all know about the defeat devices.
Yeah, exactly. No, fantastic point. There's just like, the specialist on emissions testing is like, oh, yeah, no. Your test results are right. Obviously, they're right. There's just a defeat device. There's a simple answer.
Yeah. Yeah, right. No. Look, you are correct.
All right. So 2 weeks later, there's a formal confession, and VW explains the defeat device. It's software that's monitoring the steering wheel position, speed, barometric pressure, all of these things so that it could detect the EPA test conditions. So again, these tests aren't being performed on highways over thousands of miles. They're being performed either on test tracks or in labs and under very specific conditions. So this software is able to detect when it's undergoing a test. During the testing mode, full emission controls are in place and the vehicles pass easily. During driving mode, the controls are disabled and you have up to 40 times the legal emissions.
I always love whenever companies have like really sophisticated schemes like this.
Also, the presence of a defeat device suggests that they are able to get the vehicle to the right emission standards.
Right. Yeah. That is, I think, that is such a good point that cannot be glossed over. They could pass.
They pass.
They just couldn't pass, I think you'll go into later. They couldn't pass quite with the other performance standards they wanted.
Exactly.
Right. They wanted some marketing claims. They wanted some stuff to be able to sell the cars, but they could have passed the emissions tests.
Yeah. And in fact, not only could they pass the emissions test, but they created this sophisticated software where they could shift between modes. They're like,
I know.
We only pass sometimes, which is actually much more sophisticated.
Right. We have barometric pressure testing built into your car. They should have, honestly, that might have sold me a VW. I don't know.
Fast forward to September 18th, the EPA issues notice of violation and the stock crashes 46%. So $42.5 billion in corporate value evaporated. A few days later, the CEO at the time, Martin Winterkorn, resigns, saying he's shocked and stunned. So at this point, he's claiming he has no idea. Total lie, by the way. It was evidence later proved he knew since May of 2014 or thereabouts. Ultimately, 11 million vehicles were sold worldwide. It's the biggest automotive fraud in history, exposed by researchers hoping 3 people would read their paper.
Pretty incredible. Incredible. That one, I mean, I don't think you can win Nobel Prizes for uncovering fraud, but I hope they got something. I hope they got some kind of an award for this.
Yeah, I mean, at least some pats on the back, right?
I was say maybe they get like an insignia on their door. took down global car manufacturer,
Have you
share
ever
or endowed
exposed
share.
$42.5 billion in fraud?
Gosh, insane. How do we get to court? Like, where does this go next? It obviously sounds super illegal. It sounds very shady. How do we actually get to a court case
and
here?
on Legally Curious, our take for Volkswagen is super illegal.
Yes, super illegal. That is a very sophisticated attorney term.
So after this confession or this admission comes out, within days, there are 500 plus lawsuits filed. The U.S. litigation machine mobilizes here. So there are consumer class actions alleging fraud, RICO conspiracy, breach of warranty. There are claims that people paid premiums for clean diesel features that they never received. A lot of people buying these cars wanted to buy clean emissions cars, and they thought diesel was a route to that. And then plaintiffs also allege that VW and supplier Bosch ran a criminal enterprise. So then we have this MDL that is formed. It stands for multi-district litigation. So whenever you have tons of these cases that are similar, they get consolidated and they're put on similar timelines. You're going to try some of the issues, like the common issues of fact, together, so you're not doing this case millions of times over, litigating essentially the exact same facts. It's like people bought the same cars. What did Volkswagen do or not do? So Judge Charles Breyer in the Northern District of California has consolidated all of the federal cases, and former FBI Director Robert Mueller is appointed the settlement master.
Wild that it's that Robert Mueller. I feel like when I read that, I was like, oh, huh. I knew he was a lawyer,
one and the same.
But yeah, that guy. So,
he was on tons of high profile cases. He shows up in the Martha Stewart doc. He's got his name on a lot of things.
It is wild. Some of the most famous case in history, and he was FBI director. So Robert Mueller, all right. Who knew?
He's got his finger in everything. All right, so that's the backdrop procedurally, which is going to become pretty important. Maybe not Robert Mueller so much, but the ability to bring these collective actions and these mass actions in the U.S. goes a long ways to explaining the difference in the outcomes here that we alluded to early on about how this came to be in the U.S. versus in the EU for consumers. The legal hammer here in the U.S. is the Clean Air Act. In this case, there are a bunch of other claims that could have had causes of action without it, to be clear, but there's over 500,000 vehicles in the U.S. with a max penalty per vehicle of $37,500, with the potential exposure coming out to about $18 billion. So each vehicle sale without a valid certificate equals a separate violation. VW is facing these criminal charges and massive civil liability. Judge Breyer sets an aggressive timeline. So you'll see this with some federal judges where there's this, he either wants a concrete proposal or they're going to have a bench trial. Bench trial just means not a jury trial. You're trying it before a judge. But nevertheless, they either need a concrete proposal or this case is going to trial. And it created this intense pressure on VW. It's also worth noting that Mueller was is kind of credited for having some really effective behind the scenes negotiations that led them to a tenable proposal. But the final settlement amount was $14.7 billion reached on the date of the deadline. So just 13 months from scandal to settlement here.
That is, I'm going to stop you for 1 second because that's crazy. I mean, we should put a fine, like a quick fine point on that. We have talked about cases that take so many years to move
decades
from
at times.
Issues. Decades at some times.
Yeah.
And in 13 months, they were able to get a settlement, and a settlement this big.
Yeah, I mean, there There are cases, like individual plaintiff cases for like an auto accident, say, something that happens all the time, relatively common cause of action, where, it could take 3, 4, 5 years for various reasons. I'm not saying that's common, but this was uncommon, how quickly they resolved it.
Absolutely. So Judge Charles Breyer, Legally Curious, salutes you.
Done some good work in this case, sir. And we know how much that means to you to hear from us.
Exactly. And you're in California, so hey.
Feel free to comment, like and subscribe.
Exactly.
Judge Breyer. There were 3 components to the structure of the settlement. There's the consumer compensation, which was the lion's share of this, as it should be. A little over $10 billion. They had 3 options. VW could buy back the vehicle, you could terminate the lease, or they could have the vehicles modified. Something interesting was 86% of people chose the buyback option here. They didn't want the vehicles fixed. And I didn't really look into this a ton, but you've got to imagine a big part of what's driving that is people are just pissed at VW about this. They're like, they've been lied
100%.
to.
100%. Yeah, right. You were you literally committed fraud and you're like, oh no, I'll fix it. It's like, I'm going to go to Honda. Toyota looks great right now.
Yeah. They bought back a bunch of these vehicles totaling billions and billions of dollars. They also had environmental mitigation. So there was tons of pollution. And unfortunately, it was like largely done by people who are trying to buy clean diesel vehicles. But this is another win for those people. There's this fund, $2.7 billion that went to like NOx reduction projects. All 50 states, U.S. territories, and tribes received portions of this funding, and they did diesel bus replacements with it. They improved like port equipment, tons of big projects. And then finally, we've got this zero emissions vehicle investment fund for $2 billion. Electrifying America program over 10 years, VW forced to build EV infrastructure. So tons of money going back to consumers and billions of dollars to build out environmentally friendly projects to mitigate some of the harm here. In a U.S. class action, most of the time you have to opt out. So you're automatically included in the action, which is typically a good thing for consumers because it takes effort to opt in. You might not be aware of it. You're not sure if it's a good thing or not. And so you don't opt in, the whole thing passes you by and there's no real recourse. So typically you have to opt in. There's also court oversight of the settlement. So they're making sure that the terms are sufficiently detailed and they're fair and that, enough of this money is going to the consumers. The attorney's fees are reasonable. The court is approving all of these things. And so ultimately, October 25th, 2016, we get this final approval. Less than 1% of the class opted out, and you have over $9.5 billion distributed to the consumers. According to the FTC, this is the largest consumer redress program in U.S. history at the time.
Let's go. I mean, it is, it's pretty significant for them to, again, have to buy back these cars. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't have expected that. I mean, I love it. I think that is again, to your point, or our point earlier, you're being lied to by the person who sold you one of the biggest purchases you're going to make in your life, like feels pretty bad. So like I'm down for it, but at the same time, definitely seems like a success and actually a penalty that is pretty significant. Like I think we often see some of these businesses what feels like a slap on the wrist. Like this looks huge, right? The amount of stock price drop and, combined with the penalty that they were seeing, like they were changing their tune to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And Don't look at the stock price now. Like, I haven't, but no, 100%. It's like there were real consequences, and this feels like a real consumer win where people seem to have like largely been made whole. It wasn't, it was like an economic damage that was like accounted for. And then there were these funds set up for a lot of the environmental harm. So pretty good outcome in the US. Again, a couple reasons why this works so well in the US is this class action efficiency and also the multi-district litigation consolidation we were talking about. So both two ways of bringing these collective actions that are far less common in the European Union. So without those collective actions, you have individual consumers who are trying to seek some justice or redress on their own. And it's like, even for something as expensive as $30,000, that's like, you've got to hire your own attorney. You've got to get somebody on board. It's not clear that you're going to get $30,000. They're suing VW. Like, there are going to be extremely expensive legal fees. VW is going to have a bunch of posturing. All that to say, you kind of have to have a way to consolidate these cases. And this is one of the reasons we see the bigger monetary award in the US.
No, I know it is really interesting. We've had a lot of debates about this off camera, and it's very interesting because I think you often, at least my prior is for the most part that the European Union will be stronger on regulation of business. And I think that's probably true from a government body standpoint, but the ability for really efficient class action, it does allow people individually to hold companies accountable. And we've seen that the European Union has adopted more like lenient or more ability for their consumers and people to take tax action as well. So that's a place where I'm like, oh yeah, this seems to be working really well. Like go USA on the system for allowing for people to have collective action.
Something you alluded to is we see the European Union introducing legislation that's pretty recently come into force over the last couple of years, partially in response directly to Dieselgate, where consumers can bring these collective actions. Because here's the fundamental math. Let's say it cost, conservatively, let's say it cost $10,000 for a lawyer and the lawyer's team to prosecute one of these cases, to bring, to hire an expert to bring this case. It's the type of thing that could cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Let's just say $10,000. If any theft by the company is less than that, how do you bring it? If it is $10,000, then if you're paying the lawyer's getting all of it. Why bother? So you have to have these like fairly big damages where it only starts to make sense above a certain amount. Whatever that amount may be, basically everything below it, they've got a get out of jail free card, which is who's going to stop me? And so the beauty of these collective actions is you can put together all of these people who've been ripped off for, in this case it was pretty big, like something like $30K, but for, or as little as like, $50 by stealing your data from like a tech company. They can all come together as a class and bring collective action here.
100%. You can't steal a buck from everybody. This actually allows you to have a recourse for that. You actually have a way to fight that kind of harm.
Far pithier. I like your take. Can't steal a buck from everybody. I'm taking that one.
We'll use it. We'll put that on the website.
Yeah.
So when it was all said and done, Quinn, what was the final accounting? Like, what did VW end up having to pay and be accountable for to people?
Yeah, so we've got $34 billion that bought a lot of things. Compensation for U.S. consumers, their property losses. There's the environmental remediation funding, the EV infrastructure, regulatory reforms, legal precedent, precedents. There was a lot that came out of this.
Quinn, I don't even know if we talked about one of the worst parts of this.
Oh, are we talking about some of the experiments?
Do you want to just very, very briefly, the monkey experiments?
Yeah, let's touch on it. So in 2014, VW, along with BMW and Daimler, funded a study where they locked 10 monkeys in chambers breathing in diesel fumes. They showed them cartoons to keep them calm throughout, and they tested the VW Beetle ultimately with the defeat device installed. The results were deemed too devastating and weren't published. And then things take arguably an even darker turn where they tested on 25 humans in Europe. German politicians called it absurd and inexcusable. There are these claims about fraudulent science using fraudulent vehicles. So big companies publish tons of research. Sometimes it's legitimate, sometimes it's self-serving. This case was like just another really ugly fact where their ethical standards were like, well, let's see what it does. And that was kind of their attitude about the defeat devices. It's a really blasé attitude towards the impact here. I think it puts like a fine point on that. Clearly not the biggest impact. Like the environmental impact is going to lead to premature deaths, unfortunately. But it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. And by the way, one clarification: they did not put humans in a chamber to breathe diesel, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
It was a different test, but they did do testing about, again, like the impacts of certain nitrous oxide, I think, right?
Yeah, and so like exposed to toxins, but you're not in a chamber breathing in diesel. Yeah. Great clarification. Yeah, we're not.
But at the same time, it's it's pretty grim. Like
grim.
Again, the testing that was done. All right. So what are the takeaways for us? Like what can I do in a case like this, and how should I think about class action?
Yeah, I guess whenever you're thinking about class actions, for starters, it's important to know what they are and how they can work for you. If you have a small claim, it's typically going to make sense to participate in the class action. Or even if you have a bigger claim, like in these VW cases where it might be a $30,000 claim, oftentimes it makes sense to participate. If you have really big damages or particular damages to you where you think, that car that should have been cleaner actually, poisoned somebody in our garage or whatever, and it led to like a death, then maybe the class action doesn't make sense for you and you should bring an individual action. So we're thinking about like, are your damages different than everybody else's, or are your damages huge? In either case, it could make a lot of sense to talk to a lawyer about this. By the way, worth calling a lawyer either way and saying like, I got this notice, what should I do? But this isn't legal advice, but as we're thinking about like these systems, if your claim looks like everybody else's, oftentimes class action makes sense. If you think your claim maybe looks different, or it's like a very big dollar amount in play that could be really meaningful for you, talk to a lawyer about it.
Always great advice. Talk to a lawyer. And to be clear, you don't have to do your own emissions testing. That's
my advice in this one is run a lab,
get a PhD, figure out how to do on-the-road emissions testing.
You don't need a PhD to do on-the-road emissions testing, Alex.
True.
Anybody with an at-home kit.
Anyone with $70,000 worth of equipment can figure this out. It's no deal.
I'm going to see what's going on with this diesel. I'm going to spend the next 4 months and $70K getting to the bottom of this. Well, I think I think our 3 hours of pre-show debate are starting to show.
I know.
On that note, it's been a blast, Alex. Always good seeing you, man. And
yeah. All right. See you, Quinn. Bye.
If your rights have been violated, give Mayberry Law a call at 310-776-3764. It's free, and we would love to discuss what you can do. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice or create an attorney-client relationship. For specific legal guidance, consult a qualified attorney.